In this video, we're gonna work with animation in Unreal Engine 5, and we're also gonna see a little bit about particles. So I'm just gonna play here the level that I just created. And you can see I've applied some post-production effects in this scene here, and you saw there that was like a particle animation. And for the rest, I created some cinematic. So you can see there's the cinematic actor right there, which is a level sequence. So if I just start to switch here from default to cinematic, and also I want to get into the camera that I created in the previous video, which is a cinematic camera called CineCamera actor. There you go. So right now I'm inside the camera, and I can just see the animation, but I need to have the sequence opened up. So I'm gonna click there, and this is gonna be the animation here. So just press play. You can see I animating the camera, the depth of field effect, and also that bouncing ball there in the background, and also the sunlight or dynamic light. It's animating, and there you go. You can see the other lights turning on the background. So you can definitely animate anything in Unreal Engine 5, anything that you created. So we're gonna go through the basics of animations and how we can set up this really simple animation right here. So the sequence that I create is gonna be found in the content drawer. So I'm just gonna delete it and recreate one with you. So right here I have particles, Niagara, and for the particle animation and the new level sequence. So I'm gonna right click and just delete this and force delete everything. Okay. And also the Niagara particles animation. Okay. So we can start clean. Now, first of all, right now we are in a post-process volume, and we talked about how we can use post-process volume to customize the aspect of our scene. And also, when you use the post-process volume, you can set up some rendering settings. So if you go to post-process volume, you will find a section called global illumination, and this is where you can like increase the quality of the global illumination and the final gator quality. You can increase this. You can work with other parameters, and also you can see here ray trace illumination and reflection. Also you can increase the quality right here. So we will not talk about setting up the camera or setting up the post-process effects like bloom and lens effects and saturation. In this case, I've desaturated the image a little bit to give more like dramatic look to the scene. But we're gonna go straight into animation. So what you need to create animation is to create, first of all, a level sequence. So you can go up here and just add level sequence. And again, it's gonna ask you where to place it. And I've created here an animation folder called animation. This is where I'm gonna save everything. So I can call this new level sequence. I'm gonna save it, and there you go. So I have this sequencer panel. This is the first panel that you will need. If you don't find it or you don't see it, you can go here to window and open it up from cinematics, and there you go. You can open up the sequencer from here. This is the first one that you should probably set up and use. Now the second one, I think it's a little bit more advanced, but I find it necessary often, is the curve editor. And this is where we can see the animation but in represented as curves. And then we need another one, which is actually a plugin. So we need to go to edit, plugins, and let's search for the movie render queue. And you can see I've already activated these two and you can do the same. You will need to restart your system in order to use them. So let's close this. And when you activate that, you can open it up either from the bottom here, if you click this render this movie to a video or image sequence. So if you click here, this is going to be your movie render queue panel. And this is where you set up essentially the way you want to save your static images or your rendered animation. You can see it has already an output, but you can change that. And you need to set up this a little bit if you want, but usually you probably want to change some stuff. So what I'll do is I'll just click on the settings here, which right now these are called unsaved config. So I'm gonna click there, and you can see that by default it's gonna save JPEG sequence. Now don't worry if you cannot save a movie, because when you have a sequence of images, it's even better because you can then work with them in Premiere Pro or After Effects or in another software, video editing or video effects software. Now, probably the most important thing right here is the output. And here you can decide where you want to save your render images or your render animation right here. So you click on these three dots and you can select the folder. You can see I have created a folder and selected a folder called renders and animation. So I'm gonna select this folder here, and you can also change the way the file are gonna be named. So right now it's gonna be like this, the sequence name dot the frame number. Now for those of you who didn't ever work with animation, don't worry, we're gonna explain what frames are and keyframes are. They're all here in the timeline, which is basically based on frames. So each single number here represents a single frame. And also right now we are at 30 FPS, which means frame per second. We can lower that number, we can increase it. Now this means that we're gonna render 25 images to have 1 second of animation. So the more we increase this value, the more work we need to do in the rendering process. So I'm gonna leave it to 25 per second right now, and don't go lower than 24, otherwise it's gonna be too low and you're gonna see like the passage from an image to the other. So you can see here also I can define a custom frame rate, and again I can say, okay, let's do 25 FPS, so 25 frame per second. Now for example, if we use 25 frame per second and you have here 100 frames, you're gonna have 4 seconds of animation. Now we have actually 125, so these are like 5 seconds of animation running on 25 FPS. So this is basically how it's gonna work. You need to define FPS, you need to define how many do you want in there, how many frames. And let's see something else here. So you can also decide to don't render every frame, but you can have a starting frame and an ending frame here. So you can start from 25 and end to 75 if you want. So you're only gonna render 50 frames. And that's pretty much it right here. Now you can also apply more settings. You can see here, for example, you can apply settings for the anti-aliasing. And we already talked about anti-aliasing. We saw how it's really important to have like nice render image. So you can set up also from here the anti-aliasing. You can also change the export format. So you can export, for example, in PNG or Final Cut Pro if you want to go directly to this video editing software. There you go. So I can say, okay, I want to export PNG images instead of JPEG. And then you have also other stuff here you can add on these settings. But this is just the basic stuff that you probably want to fix before you even start to render. And also another important thing here is the resolution. So right now is Full HD, and this is the default, but you can